All right, so we are up to day 194 of going through my old journal. The quote for today says, "One person can make a difference and everyone should try." It says, what kind of difference do you want to make and where do you want to make it? So if you're following along, you might pause and take a minute to think about how you might respond to this. And I'm gonna read what I wrote. So I've touched on this a little bit before. Let's see what I wrote here. So I said, what kind of difference do you want to make? Where do you want to make it? I said, I'm not sure. Sorry, I've got cat hair. Said, I've always felt like I've wanted to make a difference in the world, but have never felt like I was in a position to do anything. I know there are small things people can do for others, but I feel like being introverted hinders me from doing a lot of those things. I said, I know I've worked in fields that have required me to be extroverted. I said, but I don't know. I feel like with those roles, there was a laid out structure where things were organized and I felt trained in such a way that it wasn't so bad. So I guess, like, people have a hard time believing that I'm introverted sometimes because some of the jobs that I've had have required me to be extroverted and talk to people, like when I worked at Disney or when I was a server. But I think what I'm talking about with the structure is that when you work at Disney, they give you like a script. And so there was like a structured extroversion. Like I'm not good at having just like on the spot conversations with people unless I like really know them and I feel comfortable with them. I have a hard time with like small talk or like networking and things like that. But if it's something, but I don't really have a problem like getting up in front of people and like public speaking too much, as long as I know what I'm talking about. So maybe some people are like, well, you're so comfortable getting up and speaking about things and being in front of people, surely you're not an introvert. But like in a lot of other ways, I am very introverted. And I said, now that I think about it, pretty much every volunteer or charity experience I've ever done has brought a lot of anxiety. Things always seem unorganized and chaotic, and I don't know, I've just never got a good feeling from it. And so yeah, they say like, oh, if you want to make a difference, go volunteer. But every time that I've done that, there's just been something has felt off about it, and I can't explain why. Well, I think that's like the explanation as to why. Like a lot of, maybe I've just never worked with a group that was like really organized, and the more I hear about some of these things, the more it seems like some volunteer organizations play off of people wanting to get involved because sometimes they take advantage of people because they just assume that the people are going to, what am I trying to say? Like do things based on that feeling of like, well, you're volunteering, you're helping, but really like the organization is not really doing a lot to actually help. So people volunteering, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Well, I guess I saw this one guy the other day talking about how like being a teacher or being a nurse are kind of cultish because, and a lot of and he was talking about how he feels like a lot of teachers or like people in fields like nursing get taken advantage of because there's that aspect of like, you're making a difference, you're helping people, you know, you're teaching kids, and so they end up working for lower pay or like working under bad conditions. But the people like the administrators and stuff play into like, well, but you're necessary and you're needed and you're doing this good deed and everything. And lately there's been a lot of people like quit teaching jobs because because they don't feel like they're actually being effective in reaching that goal of like educating children. And nurses are just feeling like really stressed, especially after COVID. Like they're feeling really like overworked and undervalued, and they still want to help people. They still like the fields and they want to, but they didn't feel like they were actually achieving those goals of what they were intended for, you know, I guess. I said it's like other people leave like these volunteer events and stuff patting themselves on the back because they spent the day doing something good for society, but I end up feeling drained and not good at all. I said, like, I've never felt like any volunteer work I've done has actually been meaningful or helped anyone. So yeah, I guess I want to make a difference and I want to help, but I don't really know how to do that. And me and my roommate were even talking about that today, because he was like, you know, and I'm like, well, how can you do that? And he's like, well, you have to make money. And when you have enough money, then you can help people. And I'm like, but I don't feel like helping people should be contingent on like having enough money to help people. Like, but it is, like, that's the way our system is set up. It's like, it's kind of hard to help other people when you don't have the money or resources to do it. And we get in this argument about like government, and I am conflicted about government. Like, what spurred this conversation was this book that I'm reading about evidence-based policy, and how in recent years, like, the administration has tried to tie like a lot of their policy programs into like being heavily evaluated so that you can measure like the outcomes of the policies that they're implementing. And it goes through like some of these programs that they were trying to get passed, and it started getting into like all the red tape and all the bureaucracy that they had to go through to get this program passed. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, if this is how like policies really get passed in government, like, it's just so convoluted, and there's so much politics and so many factors in play. And so I was telling my roommate about this, and he's just like, yeah, government doesn't work. And I'm like, well, no, like, I think government could work. Like, I think that's one way to like have like collect, like, I think the way to get like major change happen is to like collectively, you can have the resources to do that, but it's just failing right now because like the goals aren't, there's just all of this like messed up stuff and corruption that's getting in the way, and we're not achieving the goals that really are supposed to be there for the government to work for everybody's benefit. And so his view is like, it'll never work, it's not working. And I'm like, well, it's working better in some other countries, and but I don't know the solution. And I wish I knew a way where I could make a substantial difference, but I haven't found that yet. But I hope to find it. I have some ideas. But he's right, it does take like money to put this together. And I think one bad part of like a lot of these like volunteer nonprofits, it's like, I think it starts out with that assumption of we want to do good, but then the reality of like, to do good, you have to have money, or you have to have people contributing, and then you get tied up in like, well, how do we raise money? And then that aspect takes over, and you don't really like fully get to like achieve your goals of what you initially like set out to do. But I don't know. But then I was reading that other book the other day that I brought up a couple times about how, you know, in these areas, it just took like one person being like a mentor to someone else to like turn their lives around. And I've mentioned like, well, maybe it's not doing these big grand things to have a big impact. Maybe it's just like one person at a time, and then maybe if you help like one person at a time, then those people will go on to do good things. And so maybe it just gets spread out through just working with individuals over time. So I don't know. That's what I had for that day. I will be back tomorrow with day 195.